We have come to liberate you from all the ways that you hold us down. When you hurt me, you hurt you too. When you free me, you free yourself. When you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. When you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. Yes? Would you sing that with me? Okay, I'll sing the line, you sing it back to me. We have come to liberate you from all the ways that you hold us down. When you hurt me, you hurt you too. When you free me, you free yourself. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Now you. Everybody rises, that's right. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. You. Poor folk are the first to suffer in this war economy. But I'm your daughter, I'm your mother. We're a chosen family. All together, when you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. Woo! When you lift from the bottom, everybody, ooh, sing it again. When you lift from the bottom, everybody rises, that's right. When you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. Hear this. We need air that's clean to breathe. We need water we can drink. You might say that we are weak, but we are stronger than you think. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Oh, when you live from the bottom, everybody rises. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Okay. So now when I say we have come to liberate you, it's because liberation is not something they're giving to you. We do not march to the Capitol so that they will give us liberation. That is not how liberation works. When we say we are here to liberate you, we are saying that when they hurt us, when they hold people down, they too are wrapped up in this evil, and we are saying we are here to free you from it. That's the gospel, my friends. That is the gospel. So let's sing that again. And remember that next time you march to the Capitol, y'all, that we are not there asking for something from them, that we are going there to give something to them. Do you understand what I'm saying? So sing with me. to liberate you, sing. From all that ways you hold me down. When you hurt me, you hurt you too. When you free me, you free yourself. You free yourself. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Yeah. You live from the bottom, everybody rises. One more again. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Oh. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Oh. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. When you live from the bottom, everybody. Now just y'all, sing it out. Everybody. Yeah. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Keep it up, y'all. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Last two times now. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. All right, bring that message to them, y'all. Let's free some people. Peace.
Howdy. Welcome to the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. This is our August welcoming session. And in the Poor People's Campaign, we always begin our meetings with what we call a land acknowledgement, where we tell each other where we're from and whose land that we are on. And since this is a full California meeting, I'm going to read an acknowledgement that speaks for the whole state. Because wherever we are in California, we live on what was and is still the tribal land of indigenous people. We acknowledge all ancestors of body and spirit and those who have come before us in this work. So welcome. I'm Abraham Enton. I live in Santa Rosa, California. Happens to be on Pomo land. And I'm co-facilitating today with Lisa Pedersen, who's in Orange County, and I have no idea whose land that is, but I'm sure she knows. We start these sessions with a bit of the history, going back to the beginning of the original Poor People's Campaign of 1968. And I'm going to turn that over to my co-facilitator, Lisa, to take us through that.
Right on. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. It's so wonderful to be sharing this space with you. My name is Lisa Pedersen, and I'm on the land of the Jashi, Tongva, and the Quiche. And so down here in Orange County, California. So as Abraham mentioned, I'm going to go over and just give you like a little, we're going to do some time traveling back, right, to the 60s. So cool, if we can go ahead and advance to the next slide, and let's go ahead and jump into this and do it. So we are now in the year of 1967 and 68, and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., many civil rights leaders and others came together to forge a campaign to bring national attention to the unjust economic conditions facing millions of people worldwide. And so in November of 1967, Dr. King announced the Poor People's Campaign to challenge the economic inequality, militarism, and poverty. He articulated a clear formula of how the poor can claim the power that resides within our communities to create a new and unsettling force. His vision basically emphasized the importance of the respect for the poor and the need for Blacks, whites, Latinos, Asians, and Native Americans to unite. Next slide, please. And so here on December, okay, so sorry for a moment there. And we've just done like a 50-year time jump, right? Time warp here. So we are now back in December 4th of 2017, and that marks the 50th year anniversary of the announcement of the first Poor People's Campaign. And so a diverse group of leadership came together in Washington, D.C. to launch the new Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And that is co-chaired by Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II of Repairers of the Breach, and Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis of Cairo Center, with the support of many organizations, denominations, individuals, now in 45 states all across our country. The campaign launched with two primary goals, and the first one is to change the narrative by changing the narrator. That means basically putting more focus on who and why people are poor and amplifying the voices of those most impacted by systemic forces that keep people in poverty. And the second goal is to build power to change policy through a fusion movement that unites communities and partner organizations all across the US. And so up next, we're going to be switching slides here in a moment, and we're going to get to hear about watch a video of the history of this 1968 campaign, and which features Bishop Barber talking about the new Poor People's Campaign.
Next, an effort to revive a famous movement of the 1960s focused on reducing poverty, inequality, and tackling social justice. But with such a broad agenda, will it find enough support at this polarized time? We start with a look at the campaign that began 50 years ago. Shortly before his death in 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. expanded his civil rights campaign to include calls for economic justice. He called for an economic revolution that included protection and services for the poorest Americans. He would call it the Poor People's Campaign.
We are coming to get our check.
The campaign would bring together poor people from across the country and from across racial, ethnic, and geographic lines, including poor whites, for a march on Washington.
Even if you have to bring a whole family, we are going to have in Washington facilities, and we're going to have food, and we are going to demand that the government do something about these conditions.
The first step was to construct a shanty town called Resurrection City on the National Mall, housing thousands of participants in a form of nonviolent civil disobedience. Dr. King himself would never make it to the March on Washington. He died that spring. But weeks after his assassination, 50,000 people gathered in solidarity, demanding economic reform on the steps where Dr. King had professed, "I have a dream."
We come with an appeal to open the doors of America to the almost 50 million Americans who have not been given a fair share of America's wealth and opportunity.
Half a century later, a group of religious and moral leaders are planning a wave of civil disobedience in Washington, a revival of the Poor People's Campaign. It is headed in part by the Reverend William Barber, who's the co-chair of the campaign. He led demonstrators at a rally in front of the U.S. Capitol this month, and he was arrested, alongside the Reverend Jesse Jackson, a key figure in the 1968 movement. I spoke with Reverend Barber recently when he was in Washington. Reverend William Barber, welcome to the NewsHour. Thank you very much for joining us. When the original Poor People's Campaign took place, it was 50 years ago. Dr. Martin Luther King was involved. After he was assassinated, it continued. But what is the connection between then and now?
Well, thank you so much for having us. And on behalf of the campaign, the National Poor People's Campaign, National Call for Moral Revival, and my co-chair, Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis, let me say that the connection was, first of all, that it did continue, that people realized Dr. King was right. Racism poverty, and militarism were interconnected. The connection today is we did a study, we commissioned a study with the Institute for Policy Studies and also had some help with Urban Institute, anecdotal and empirical data. And we did something called the Souls of Poor Folk, auditing America 50 years after the Poor People's Campaign. What did we find? Today, there are 140 million poor and low wealth people. Today, there are 250,000 people that die every year from low wealth. We have less voting rights today because of the gutting of the Voting Rights Act than we had in 1965. We have 62 million people who are working poor, who work for less than a living wage, and 14 million children who are in poverty.
Those numbers are overwhelming. They are daunting. You're not proposing to do away with poverty, are you?
We are saying that there are 5 interlocking injustices that America has to face because they continue to cause policy violence. That is systemic racism, particularly seen through the lens of voter suppression, where people use voter suppression to get elected, and then once they get elected, they pass policies that hurt the poor, mostly white women, children, and the working poor. Systemic poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy and militarism, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism that says you don't have to address those issues. We are saying, yes, America is going to have to face these 5 interlocking injustices and change them.
Why can't you work through the existing political system, work to elect political figures who agree with your agenda?
Well, several reasons. Number one, we had 26 presidential debates in the last presidential election. On the Democrat and Republican side, not 1 hour was spent on poverty. Not 1 hour was spent on voter suppression and restoring the Voting Rights Act. Not 1 hour on the war economy and militarism. So if we're not even having the conversation, the first thing we have to change is the attention violence. We have an attention violence when it comes to poverty and the poor, and we must change that before you can change the agenda. And it must be a movement of the people from the bottom up.
Reverend Barber, I talk to people, I've read folks who agree with much of what you are saying you want, but they also are saying you're asking for too many different things, that you should narrow your list of ambitions, that you'll have a much better chance at getting something done.
Well, then those same people should say narrow the Constitution because it's pretty ambitious. It says domestic tranquility, establishment of justice, providing for the common defense, promoting the welfare, general welfare. Narrow the moral call of the Bible that says you're supposed to care for the stranger, the hungry, the sick, the left out, the lonely, the imprisoned. Why is it that that wealthy and greed gets to ask for everything? They want tax cuts, they get that. They want to block health care, they get that. But then we tell poor people, you have to ask for one thing. 37 million people without health care, we have to fight for health care. Millions of people without living wages, we can't just ask for one thing because they are systemically interlocking injustices.
If there are so many who you define as poor in this country, why aren't we seeing more people rise up and make this argument? I mean, it's right now it's left to you and a relatively small group of people who are making this argument, having the march, having your demonstrations and so forth.
Well, I don't know if I would say a relatively small group. We have organizing committees in 40 states. We have people who are organizing. In the last 2 weeks, we've had thousands of people attend, over nearly 2,000 people do civil disobedience, more than ever in the history of this country, simultaneously doing nonviolent moral fusion, civil disobedience. There is a rising, and so what we're doing is we're launching a movement. We're not ending a movement. We're launching a movement and calling people to action. Many people do not know how bad it is, and many people who are poor and low wealth have been broken and pushed down and ignored. But where we're going from West Virginia to Wisconsin, from Alabama to Alaska, we're finding that there are thousands of people who are saying it's time for us to stand up and refuse to be silent.
You've said that the nation's problem is not that we don't have enough money. You said it's that we don't have the moral capacity to face what ails society. What did you mean by that?
That when you look at our deepest moral framework of the Constitution and our deepest moral values of our religious tradition, we too often have a political conversation that talks about left versus right, military or middle class. That's too puny, it's too narrow. 43.5% of this country is poor and low wealth. people are dying. Even Joseph Stiglitz, the economist, said the America has to face the cost of inequality. What I'm saying is we can't just have a left-right argument anymore. We need to have a deeply moral argument that says this is not just about Democrats or Republicans. This is about America. What kind of democracy do we want to be? You cannot have a democracy continue to exist when 400 people make an average of $97,000 an hour and you lock people up who simply want 15 in the union.
Does either political party come closer to your goals?
Well, I think they can. I think they hit at it. I think, of course, the extremists who have taken over the Republican Party have just gone so far extreme. You know, they're more focused on tax cuts to the wealthy. They want to blame poor people for their problems. Democrats, on the other hand, are willing to talk about, say, the Affordable Care Act and talk about the middle class. But the reality is neither party is willing to put right in front of America the issues of systemic racism, of systemic poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy, and say the word poverty. It's almost as though we've tried to remove even saying the word poverty, when in fact the majority of the poor people in this country are white, women, children, working people, and the disabled. So we have to change our narrative in this country. And the only way you can change the narrative is to change the narrator. That's why this campaign is focused on three things: breaking through the narrative, massive voter mobilization among the poor, and power building from the bottom up.
Reverend William Barber, the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign in 2018. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So that was a very moving, video to, not just to hear about PPC back then, but to hear about, what's going on here in our own country. One fact at the end there, it flashed, about Tent City in Washington, D.C. And a lot of people don't know that actually the Tent City actually ended up having its own zip code. They had like their own little post office so that way they could receive mail. And that was because folks were planning to stay for the long haul. So we, but unfortunately, as time would, as things would pan out, the unity and the organization needed for the Poor People's Campaign in '68 to complete all of the 3 planned stages and form the new and unsettling force that's capable of disrupting complacent national life and achieving an economic bill of rights was not easy to come by. With the assassinations of Dr. King and Senator Robert Kennedy, a key proponent of the campaign and presidential candidate, it served to cripple the campaign, and it greatly limited its impact. So midway through the campaign, Robert Kennedy, whose wife had attended the Mother's Day opening of Resurrection City, was assassinated. And out of respect for the campaign, his funeral procession passed through Resurrection City, and the Department of Interior forced Resurrection City, forced them to close on June 24th of '68 after the permit, to use the parkland had expired. So now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the impact of the 1968 Poor People's Campaign. And so, in the face of the setbacks due to political violence and assassinations, as well as the difficulties of sustaining a national movement, the Poor People's Campaign of '68 nonetheless had an impact, not only on the governmental policies, but also on public perceptions. The campaign had pushed Congress and federal agencies to allocate millions for programs such as the Head Start and Education Welfare Services for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, while it also helped to catalyze the desegregation of schools and the extension of labor programs. Significantly, the campaign had introduced new strategies for protest and social change, and the movement had also helped to transform the national discussions on race, class, economic opportunities, security, and democracy. So up next, my brother in solidarity, Abraham, he's going to walk us through the modern day of the Poor People's Campaign.
So certainly the video of Reverend Barber pointed out a lot of what this campaign is about. So I just want to highlight a few things. The idea that this is not a moment, this is a movement. And we find ours, and it's a fusion movement. And that term means that he's talking about these interlocking injustices that we face, that these are systemic obstacles on every level toward achieving the kind of progress that we want to see. But it also means that we have brothers and sisters working on all of these fronts. That is to say, there are people who are concentrating on the climate issues, the ecological destruction, which both threatens all of us, but also the poor people feel it the most. The idea of ecological racism. But this is a movement that lifts from the bottom and confronts, which means that we highlight the people themselves who are actually suffering from these conditions. And poor people's campaign events generally include many people who are on the front lines of these issues and these injustices. So the principle is to lift from the bottom, because when you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. And to work with people to build a broad, diverse coalition of people whose specific work may be on one or another of these systemic problems, but to recognize that they are all intertwined, and we cannot achieve ecological health without confronting racism and poverty, and we certainly can't do it without recognizing the war economy and the impact of a war economy, both on the environment itself and on the and on our ability to work with people all over the world to make the kind of changes that are demanded by climate change. So that's the focus, and that is the foundation of the campaign. And to add to that, that we are absolutely committed to doing this through nonviolence. That nonviolence is not a tactic, but a fundamental principle, both from a moral and a biblical and foundation, not simply a tactic. So we can go on to the, so when we talk about the principles, these are the principles that that we work on. Not to read them all, but just to say that justice for all people is fundamental to what we are trying to achieve, and that we work, and we absolutely reject the claim of insufficient resources. As Reverend Barber pointed out, there is certainly enough for everyone, or as Gandhi put it, there's enough for everyone's needs, not anyone's greed. So that's part of the fundamental principles. And we often, we study these principles, and we also often reiterate them in meetings. So going on to the next slide. So today, Reverend Barber, again, he talked about the studies that have been done to update and to make visible what it means to be poor and how many poor people are in America. And one thing about these studies, again, as Reverend Barber put it, they provide a foundation, in fact, of what is going on, because it's really bad to be loud and wrong. So when we speak about these things, we like to have this, we not just like to have, but we insist that we have our numbers, the real numbers. And I'll just want to add that, of course, the numbers that we have are actually ridiculously low, in that what is considered to be above the poverty line most of the places in the United States, you can't live on that anyway. So achieving a $15 an hour minimum wage, for instance, which is one of the key objectives of the campaign, is a beginning. We recognize that is a beginning to getting people out of poverty, but it's in no means the end of things. The idea is to actually have people get a living wage, not a minimum wage. So moving on, the next slide is now a little bit of the history of the Modern Poor People's Campaign in terms of some of the actions that have been taken. And so in 2016, there was a tour that went to 30 states, recruiting and bringing the message all over the country. Now there are organizing committees in, I believe, 45 states. But that was the movement itself really came out of Reverend Barber's Moral Monday movement in North Carolina, which was organized on a fusion basis and pulled in people from all different from labor unions and from clergy and from all different kinds of movements to work together and carry out nonviolent direct action. And so in 2018, there were 40 days of moral action, and then a bus tour in 2019, and then of course, in 2019, there was the MORE, which means mobilize, organize, register, and educate tour leading up to the 2020 election. And of course, a lot of the work needed to pivot online with the advent of COVID. And so now there are, here we are on Zoom together instead of all of us gathering someplace for this kind of meeting. But we have an extensive Zoom presence and many national, local, and regional meetings that take place virtually in this kind of way. So, and finally, as I said, in terms of having the numbers and so on, there are many documents and studies that have been carried out by third parties and the Institute for Policy Studies, for instance. So in 2018, there was the Soul of Poor Folks, the Auditing America 50 Years After the Poor People's Campaign, and Reverend Barber mentioned that in his talk as well. The Moral Agenda and the Declaration of Fundamental Rights. All of these things, by the way, can be accessed in the website, in the Poor People's Campaign website. It's very extensive, and you can pretty much find anything you want about any of these subjects in the campaign, in the website. So I think we can go on from there to the structure, and I'm going to turn it back to Lisa.
Right on. Thank you very much for leading us through that, Abraham. So we're going to look at the structure of the Poor People's Campaign, and I'm actually going to start with all of y'all here today and what this means to you when looking at it. Like, where do you fit in? So if you go down to look under California State Campaign, and under there you see Regional Steering Committee, that's what we are, right? And there's about 8 regions, you know, in California. And so you are naturally a part of one of those. And we hope to have more, hint, in case anyone's in, doesn't have a region yet and where they live, you can always start one. So anyhow, so we are, all of us on this call right now are Regional Steering Committee members. Up from that, you see Coordinating Committee, and there's about 1 to 2 people from each region that reports, that comes together and meets. So all of us across the California, 1 to 2 people meet in from the region, and we discuss, you know, what's going on statewide and creating allyship and working together on what it is that national, you know, asks us to do, as well as what our partners here in California wants us to do. And then above that, you see quad chairs, and we have 4 quad chairs in California. And so they serve they connect with national, and they report back to them what we're doing here in California. In addition, the quad chairs also reports back to the coordinating committee who makes the decisions here in California. And so that way we have like a really great communication and relationship, nationally and throughout our state. And we have working groups, as you see as well, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. And so if we go ahead and jump on to the next slide, and we see the structure of the California Poor People's Campaign, as you heard me mention about, where do we sit? Where do we fit into this? And here you can see all the different regions in that we have currently in California. And again, I'll just emphasize that if you do not belong to, if you're part of an at-large region, then I highly encourage you to get involved and go ahead and kickstart a chapter, and you would have a lot of support and love from the group to make sure that you have what you need. So anyhow, not putting any pressure on. Next, we're going to jump into and look at the California Poor People's Campaign statewide working groups. And here we have 10 working groups. That's quite a bit, all the way starting with accessibility to art and musicology, down to outreach, speaker training. So there's many ways to plug in to the work that we're doing statewide. And I'm sure in my time alone, there used to be like 5 groups. And so it's pretty amazing to see that list grow, and may it continue to grow, because that means we're meeting the needs of what we need to do for our movement. So let's see here. And I guess that's where I will go ahead and stop for the moment. And Brother Abraham, I'm going to go ahead and pass the torch over to you.
Okay, so the next slide. The next slides will show us some of the statewide actions that we've had. So if you could, move the slide along. Yes, here we are. This is a virtual, this was the fill out the, this is a virtual wall, a virtual mural from people all over the state spelling out "Everybody's got a right to live," which happens to be the chorus of one of our favorite Poor People's Campaign songs that you'll definitely hear if you attend a rally or any other action that we carry out. But so that was one of them. The next one is, if we can, yes, here we are. So back in 2020, we were trying to help get the vote out, and also at the same time to get people to participate in the census, because the census, of course, is the basis for voting, for getting true representation. And so we produced over 20,000 door hangers with census and voting information, and volunteers distributed them all over the state. And now, right now, we're distributing door hangers and flyers informing people about the federal child tax credit. So if you can, because a lot of the people who are eligible for that don't know that they are, because they've never filed a tax return. And you don't have to file the tax return, and we want people to know, poor people to know, that you can still get this $300 a month per child help. So if you are interested in helping with that, put that in the chat, and there's a link in the chat to this work. So that's something that's still going on, the door hangers and the flyers.
I'm going to interject real quick, and I'm sorry.
No, please.
I messed up on, y'all don't know this, but I messed up on my notes, and I was actually supposed to take this and run with it until the end. And so did you want me to go ahead and go with that?
Please, yes, go ahead.
All right, right on. So my apologies there. I didn't mean to go and put extra work on y'all, especially when we agreed I would do something. So anyhow, I'm back, everyone. Hi. So up next, as you can see here, our campaign, our California campaign, we did a Stop the Super Spreader events back in December 2020. If y'all have like access to the reactions, I'd love to see some thumbs up about who has heard about the Sean Fuchs, and about him going out during COVID and holding these large mass rallies and calling people in and singing and lifting up words and stuff, you know, basically to proselytize, you know, the word of God and everything. But something that he had done was that he was looking to come to, one of his stops was planned for in LA at Skid Row. And this is at a time when COVID was really high. And so naturally, you know, there's already, you know, a group of folks who are at risk, and that was going to place them further at risk. And so to stop that, stop the spreader, as we like to call, of COVID there down at Skid Row, where all their brothers and homeless sisters, you know, without homes live. So we had reached out to various people, you know, throughout the city that came and did like a blockade, you know, used their vehicles. That way folks couldn't drive down, you know, their Sean Fuchs's party couldn't go and drive through. You know, there was folks standing at different spots and just making sure that, you know, that Skid Row was, you know, safe and protected. At the last minute, because of all the demands that we were making statewide into LA, the mayor and the board of supervisors, as well as Governor Newsom, we'd asked them to take steps to prevent that gathering, and luckily they went ahead and they changed their venue over to a park. So that was pretty crazy. And Sean did go on to other parts of California, like down here in Orange County. We did like a phone call when we found out the location, you know, just phone bombed them and just asked them, please don't do it, you know, protect the lives of others and so on. But it is what it is, right? So the next big action that we did demands delivery to capitals on March 15th, 2021. Here you're looking at, here's some of you may have joined some of the Moral Mondays and saw their broadcasts online, or maybe you even attended one in person. But if not, just know that on March 15th in more than 30 states, we had did a demand of deliveries of the 14 policy priorities to the capitals. And here in California, we many people throughout that region drove to Sacramento and read the 14 points on the Capitol Mall and delivered them to the state legislator. Then there was a die-in on February 26, 2021. It was the Sacramento Poor People's Campaign Action. And here you can see folks, you know, carrying a banner, no more homelessness and deaths. And there's one of our tri-chairs there holding up a sign that's Faye, amazing human being that does so much great work. And over the right, you can see people laying there and, you know, socially distancing and doing the die-in. So up in Sacramento, they did a Services Not Sweeps, a group, I guess, I'm sorry. A group called Services Not Sweeps Coalition. They held local officials accountable for the deaths of our unhoused neighbors during the 2020 up to the present of all the folks that had passed away. And so as you can see in the description, you know, there's 3 photos from the die-in and they're all featured. And one of them has a white sign with the red letters saying no more homeless deaths. Oh, looks like I've already gone through that. So sorry about that, folks. Just want to make sure that all my I's are dotted and T's are crossed and that you know what you're looking at in front of you, because these are very meaningful moments. Just so short, but so deep in meaning. So the Los Angeles Poor People's Campaign Action did a rent strike on April 21st, 2020. There you can see that they were addressing the local rent strike. Kenya, hope I say her last name correctly, Aloser of the California Poor People's Campaign in Los Angeles is quoted as saying, "We are already fighting for an eviction moratorium before the COVID crisis. And now we're seeing that that was possible during this crisis. If banks are getting bailed out and corporations are bailed out, why aren't poor people getting bailed out through this process as well?" Kenya, you should all know, also serves as a chair of the National Steering Committee for the California Poor People's Campaign. Next up in Oakland, they did a beautiful mural in yellow, green, and brown with a slogan about housing. And so the Bay Area Art Theomusicology Working Group, in collaboration with the Cardboard and Concrete Collective of the Village and Feed the People, put this mural down in front of the Oakland City Hall to demand upgrades, not evictions, and pathways to housing for our unhoused neighbors. And then I'm looking at our next slide here. We see that Take Action nationally, 365 days of fighting forward. The launching of the reconstruction of the resolution. And so we are actually in this right now. So our Moral Mondays resumed on May 24th of 2021 with the launch of the third reconstruction, the congressional resolution to fully address poverty from the bottom. Here you see Reverend Liz Theo-Harris and Bishop Barber with co-sponsors, Representatives Barbara Lee from California and Pramelia Jayapal from Washington. This resolution recognizes that in order to build the true third reconstruction, that we must deal with the 5 interlocking injustices. And currently there are 8 California reps who've signed on, and they are Barbara Lee, who's the sponsor, Sarah Jacobs, Mark D. Soliner, Ted Lieu, Juan Vargas, Alan Lowenthal, Ro Khanna, and Jimmy Gomez. And there's 39 people statewide, or I should say representatives statewide, that have signed on. So for more information about this, I highly recommend you to go to thirdreconstruction.org to read the resolution, as well as to send your letter to a rep thanking them if they signed on to that. And if they hadn't, you know, definitely go ahead and ask them why they have not. And to find that thirdreconstruction.org link, just go ahead and go into our chat.
Can I just add to that,
oh my
Lisa?
gosh,
Yeah,
I'd love you to.
Okay, so the idea of a third reconstruction builds upon the foundation that, of course, reconstruction is what happened right after the Civil War, the first reconstruction. And it was great gain. Besides the ends of slavery, there were large numbers of African Americans who were elected to state and federal offices and so on. And then you had this backlash with the rise of the Ku Klux Klan and the pulling of federal troops from the South and so on, and the beginning of Jim Crow. And Jim Crow held its reign over the country for the next 80 years or 60, 70 years. And then you had what we call the second Reconstruction, which we also call the Civil Rights Movement. And again, you had the Mississippi Summer and all of those events, and it resulted ultimately in the War on Poverty and the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And then again, you had a backlash through the Southern strategy of Richard Nixon and the Republican Party, and now we're watching something as destructive as the Ku Klux Klan, which is this orchestrated attack on voting rights all over the country. And that's, so the principle is that we are launching there's a need for a third reconstruction to end this and to finally end this and to realize the potential of democracy that has never really been realized in the United States, but can if it's led through this idea of reconstruction. Just wanted to add that.
I'm so glad you did. So I didn't think to go ahead and provide more information, and I love that you did. So if there's anything else that comes up along the way, please feel free to share, and just let folks know too. Pretty soon we're going to be breaking out into our rooms. So I just want to thank you for listening and being a part of this, and can't wait to connect with you. But up next, we're just going to have a short video about our national organizing push for the congressional representatives to sign on.
We are in one of those moments that demand a poor people's campaign.
Our brothers and sisters are sleeping on the streets. For a country this rich to have so many people poor, it's immoral and it's wrong.
When we throw away more food than it takes to feed every person, not just that's hungry in this country, but around the world, that is not right.
Something is wrong.
That is a moral emergency, and that's why we need a Poor People's Campaign.
There's other systems here that are oppressing us that voting won't always fix, and that we've got to talk about, we've got to call it out, and we've got to mobilize and build a movement to be able to change these things that our politicians won't always change.
But if you don't recognize us, and then it goes back to that second chapter, that we're the forgotten ones.
Until we are ready to keep this fight going.
Because it's crucial that we make ourselves heard.
Let the people vote! That's how you honor veterans.
When you hold down the poor, you hold down America.
Our backs are against the wall, and we got no choice but to push.
We are building a multiracial, intergenerational, nonviolent army of the poor that will break every chain. Every chain.
And so we have to come to a point that every attack on the poor will embolden our agitation. Every attack on sick folk will embolden our agitation. Every attack on immigrants will embolden our agitation.
We can do more. We can do better. And we're building the power. Forward together. Not one step back.
We want health care. We're not lazy. We work. We work.
That's right.
We want a living wage. We want unions. We want health care. We want just what basic people need.
Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to dream.
I'm ready to fight. I am tired.
Where we're going to keep on making this holy trouble, keep on defending our democracy, keep on speaking for voting rights and for health care and for living wages and for everything that everybody in this society needs to thrive.
It's time to get it right here and right now. No racist superiority is ever greater than the rights of humanity.
Our country now stands at a tipping point. We can realize a third Reconstruction to fully address poverty and low wages from the bottom up.
We all must embrace this omnibus vision of third Reconstruction. No democracy can claim to be strong when 140 million people, or 43% of its people, are poor and low wealth. That's talking about 52% of children under 18, 39 million children. That's 41% of elders above 65, 21 million. That's 42.6% of men, that's 65 million. That's 45% of women, 74 million. That's 60% of black people, 26 million. That's 64% of Latinos, 38 million. That's 40% of Asian people, 8 million. That's 59% of Native Indigenous people, that's 2.1 million. And that's 33.5% of white people, that's 66 million white people. Before the pandemic ever hit, according to a study at Columbia University, 250,000 people a year died from the pandemic of poverty, 750 people a day.
We have the solutions. They're right here. They're right here in this third Reconstruction resolution. And so we must build the political will, the compelling power, the resolve to lift from the bottom.
This is a moral issue rooted in the commitments of our Constitution, that the first thing we swear to is to establish justice, promote the general welfare, and to ensure equal protection under the law. This is a moral agenda, but a moral agenda from my faith tradition. Morality is not just folk coming together and singing we love each other. It is coming together by the Spirit, building a community where there is no lack. So a moral agenda is also a sound economic agenda.
Today we say to poor people, Mr. Speaker, we see you and we will eradicate poverty in our country with you.
It's movement time. It's time to shake this nation because this nation is locked up.
Rise up. Rise up. Rise up.
Get up tomorrow and start the revolution.
Right there with you. Anybody else like, wow?
Every time I see that one, I just almost start to cry. It's just, yes. So we're going to go into a breakout room now. So give everybody a chance to speak. The breakout room is for about 20 minutes. And so please introduce yourself, your name, your pronouns, and your location, and just share one thought or reflection, or if you have a question you want to raise, but make sure everybody has time to speak. So we're going to go there now, and please, and we'll see you in 20 minutes.
Hey, everybody. Are we all back?
I think we are.
Right on. Very cool. Well, that was very beautiful. I loved it was with group 3, and it was just very heartfelt and just it's beautiful, right? This campaign and the people that come and share in this space, you know, we hear folks who are impacted, and it just really moves you. It just it gets you. You can't see it. It gets you in the heart. So where do we go from here, Abraham?
Well, first of all, if anybody has a question, a more general question or comment, we can. How much time do we have? I'm just trying to look for some kind of
10
clock.
minutes.
We have 10 minutes.
Yes. So 10 minutes. So if anybody has a particular comment or question that they'd like to share, unmute yourself and ask it, and we can go from there.
I guess I had a question about the upcoming rent moratorium, in which it's estimated around 15 million people might be evicted in the middle of this sort of Delta variant liftoff. And I was interested to see if the Poor People's Campaign was thinking about anything involving that, at a critical moment.
So yes, please, Reverend Rowan, who's one of our tech people, but who's also knows a lot. So she can answer that question.
Well, I wish I had the URL on the top of my head, but we have actually, as the California Poor People's Campaign, have put together a website with resources for COVID, with how to get hooked up. And I will try and find that while y'all answer more questions, but I just do want you to know that it exists. And I'm putting some of our Twitter and Facebook links in the chat, and also the feedback form. And it's really important to fill out the feedback form if you want to get more involved, because you can tell us what working groups you're interested in, and somebody will contact you. If you want a one-on-one, you might get a call from somebody in your region to contact with you. So the best way to get more connected and to find out things, if you want to ask that question about what our resources are, you can ask it on the feedback form, and I guarantee you that that person will have the answer off the top of your head, unlike me.
That tell you anything, Tucker? Okay with that? I think you were probably, it sounded to me like you were asking whether the campaign as a whole was going to focus something on that as a political action, and somebody probably will be able to answer that as well. Somebody else? Chuck, was that you? You just speak up if it is. No, it wasn't you. It's just you waving your hand.
The COVID resources link is now in the chat.
Okay.
Thank you, Reverend Rowan.
Just to say that the next meeting, like the next welcoming session, will be September 7th, which is the day after Labor Day. at the same time. So if you either want to hear this again, or if you know people who would be interested, generally we do this on the first Tuesday of every month. So if you know anybody who you think might be interested in benefit, then please let them know. It's the first Tuesday of September as well.
And we just want a quick ask too, you know, to sustain the work that we're doing here in California, we raise funds to help impacted folks, to help get the information out, such as like flyers, you know, so that people can know about the child welfare, you know, subsidence out there. I think I said that word right. Sorry, I'm getting tired here. But there's so many things that we do. You know, we work together to raise funds to send impacted folks to Washington, D.C., you know, to go talk to the Congress people, to go participate as moral supporters, do direct action. You know, we help with just on so many different levels. So Reverend Rowan put a link in about making a donation to the California Poor People's Campaign. It is tax deductible. And so anything you can give, whether if it's $5, $10, $50, if you got $1,000, you know, 5,000 maybe laying around, you know, it's awesome, right? But this money always goes back into the community to help spread the word about the Poor People's Campaign, about ways people can get involved and what's out there for them to help benefit them and, you know, help our brothers and sisters, right? So again, you know, like any amount that you can give, it would just be greatly appreciated. And also too, there's the link in the chat room for doing feedback. You know, we love to hear back. What can we do to improve, you know, in our facilitating and whatnot. This is my first time, so, you know, definitely be critical. That's how I learned to become a better facilitator, right? You know, by telling me I did a great job, that's nice and everything, but I need to know where I can improve because I want to, you know, really bring home the message of the Poor People's Campaign.
Well, if there aren't any other questions, we have a way in the Poor People's Campaign that we close all of our meetings. And we ask everybody to unmute, if you would. Everybody unmute. And then, Lisa, would you like to lead?
All right.
Okay.
All right, so I just dropped in the chat. Well, here it goes. It just dropped now. Our saying that we love: forward together, not one step back.
One step back.
Right? Yeah.
So,
all right, I did do that correctly. Right on. So when I say forward together, everyone, not one, you say not one step back. You got it? And we're going to do this like 3 times. So forward together, not one step back. Forward together, not one step back. Forward together, not one step back. All right, exactly. That's what we are about here. I love you all. Thank you just so much for being here. You could be anywhere doing anything, but you chose to be here, and that is just so beautiful. You know, I just wish you a great, amazing day and stuff. And I hope to, you know, see you in person as well as on other Zoom calls and working together. And perhaps we'll cross paths in DC as well.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you. You did a great job facilitating, both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.